there's one more town, I'll be going. Fight for the winner, I'll be there.
We were, well, I guess this wasn't part of the tour. This was a request that we had from that inspector that came, that we met, that was an inspector in Denmark. We would call a principal in America. Inspector Peterson and his wife invited us to come and perform in the summer of 1963. Well, we got an invitation, and that they were the proprietors of that 15-story high school, which is like a community or a junior college. We were summoned by missionaries to come to Viborg, which is about an hour's drive from Herning, where that big school was. On the way, I was driving our van, and the guys in the back were visiting with each other, and I was listening to the radio, and I heard what I thought, President Kennedy blev skudt, which in Danish means that President Kennedy had been shot. And then they went on with other news items, and I said, guys, did any of you hear that? And they said, no, we were busy visiting. When we got to the concert, I asked if some of the members of the church that were there would look or listen to a radio and find out if what I heard was true. And at the end of the concert, they came up to us and said, yes, we just got notice on the news that President Kennedy had been assassinated in the United States. And the Danes loved President Kennedy and his wife, Jacqueline. They were so popular. They were in the headlines of the news. You know, it was the time when Kennedy confrontation with Khrushchev was taking place as well. And so the familiarity of John and Jacqueline Kennedy to the Danish people they were one of their favorite national leaders, based on paper headlines that I read myself on the newsstands.
Wasn't this about the time you were on TV?
Yes. But that was closer, when was that? Yeah, that may have been that very summer. There's one television company in Denmark, and that's National Danish TV. And they were doing a documentary on that 15-story high junior college, I guess I ought to call it. They call it a high school, where the kids live in while they're being instructed. And they were doing a documentary about that school, and the Inspector Peterson said, you guys, I want you to be part of this TV documentary because you're part of our curriculum now. You come here frequently enough, we're going to include you. And so we were interviewed. We're given at least 10 minutes at the end of the documentary. And that the Lord works in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform. Guess what was coming on television right after our interview and performance? Just seconds afterward. It was the first satellite broadcast across the Atlantic Ocean from America to Europe. And what was being broadcast? The news about the assassination of John Kennedy. And every Dane was tuned to the TV because they knew it was going to be, it had been announced on the TV. And the fact that documentary of that high school, which included our 10-minute interview and performance, preceded it by seconds. And we couldn't walk on a door after that, but what people recognized, we saw you guys on TV. It was special. So I'm sure that President Thorup and his wife, who asked us to organize the quartet and do what the Lord intended for us to do, became a reality and blessing, whereby much of the prejudice about the Mormon people was put down because they saw young Mormon American missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints performing music in their language and speaking their language and loving the people of Denmark, which we did, and they loved us. And I can't help but feel that the Lord intended us to become, quote unquote, famous for no other purpose than to promote the work of the Lord in the land of Denmark.
If there's one more town, I'll be going. Fight for the winner, I'll be there. If there's one more song, I'll be singing. I'm always going, but I don't know where. Keep a moving on. I spent 17